So much. Wonderful. Okay, so you're all very welcome back, and just want to introduce to our next guest, who is the CEO of AIB and the current President of Ibec, Mr. Colin Hunt, a man who has a truly storied career. Colin has previously been a special policy advisor at the Departments of Transport and Finance, as well as research director and chief economist at Goodbody Stockbrokers. He's also served as a non-executive director of Aer Lingus from 2008 to 2014. A turbulent time, if you'll excuse the pun. But we can take it for granted that he knows a lot about this sector. So please give a very, very warm welcome to Colin Hunt. You're very welcome.
Thank you, Dearbhail. I almost didn't recognise myself the way you were describing me there.
I know. I think the thing with bios is that they sound like obituaries, and it gets weird. It kind of gets weird when you hear yourself in the third person, and you're like, oh my God, that's really good. Who did that? But let's just talk about the banking sector, because the Irish state completed its exit from AIB in June, and that marked the end of a really significant and very, very painful and difficult chapter for the whole country. And obviously, the banking sector, received billions in bailout funds after the global financial crash, at a time when you were serving, actually, as an NED on Aer Lingus, because we had our banking sector was nationalised in all but name. What next for AIB and for the banking sector as a whole? The sackcloth and ashes, are they nearly gone?
They should always be at hand. You should always remain confident but humble and conscious of the fact that this is an industry which has a destructive capacity like no other. The banking, when you get it wrong, creates a lot of damage in an economy and in society, and we know that more than most. So I was very pleased that after a 15-year journey, we managed to return the bank to state to full private ownership in June of this year, on Bloomsday. And that we managed to repay the state in full as well for the bailout funds. Because it was an important validation and vindication of the strategy that we'd embarked on. But it also marks the closing of a chapter. And we would have spent a huge amount of time, but first of all, repairing the institution, which had been so badly damaged, in large part by its own actions during the global financial crisis. And there was a huge amount of our energy and our time spent looking backwards, dealing with past issues. But that's now over. It's a wonderful position to be in, that we can look forward now from a position of huge strength. Because if you look at where AIB found itself at the start of the GFC, the global financial crisis, and to where it is now, they are at diametric opposites. We were poorly capitalised, with very, very poor liquidity going into a major global crisis. And now we are amongst the best capitalised and most liquid banks in the world. So we're in a position of huge strength to deliver on our purpose, which is to support our customers.
And can I just talk to you about the legacy of that? I wrote a book about the crash many years ago now, and I remember one developer saying, the world had a party, Ireland had a rave, which sort of captured maybe where we were. But what I've been really struck by lately is the extent to which the crash is even still filling into contemporary debate from a generation who were very young when it happened. So the new book, Bailout Babies, that is out, CMAT, kind of, speaking back to those times, a whole generation, and Mark Little kind of spoke about it, who weren't here or were very, very young when it happened, yet they have their own memory of it. So what is our responsibility to that generation who are caught up in a housing crisis, who are caught up in a cost of living crisis?
I think that the crash was so enormous, and it was. The average house price in this country fell by 50%. The average commercial property fell by 60%. Thousands upon thousands of businesses went out of business, and so many tens of thousands of people lost their jobs. So it was a huge psychological moment that has had massive psychological impact. You look at behaviours today, and I think they are very heavily influenced by what happened between 2007 and 2010.
Have you learned the lessons, Colin?
I think we have learned the lessons, and I'll come back to that in a second. But the two big psychological impacts that I see is that there is a really strong preference for people to have quick and easy access to liquid funds. So our savings ratio, even at the peak of the Celtic Tiger mania was about 5%. Now it's running at 14%, which is extraordinary. We are huge savers in this country.
Does that itself pose a risk?
Well, it does, because if you're a huge saver, you're an under-consumer and under-investor. And the second major impact is that there's been a debt aversion. People do not want to be carrying what they regard as excessive levels of debt. So we all went into the household sector and the corporate sector went into the crisis massively over-indebted. But if you look at what's happened over the course of the past 15 years, we've had a very significant deleveraging of the Irish economy, to the extent that the real level of leverage in the Irish economy now is a fraction of what it was in 2007, probably of the order of 30-35% of what it was in 2007. So ironically, our conservatism, we swung from the rave, that's your word, not mine, to marked conservatism.
Are we disco dancing rather than partying?
Well, I think the party's well over, but we went to conservatism, which actually puts us in a very, very strong position at a time of great global uncertainty.
We were speaking earlier just with the Minister about, the role of watchdogs and that we put in place afterwards. We have this sort of what's been dubbed as the new troika, ASRI, IFAC, central bank kind of warning, particularly with this budget and where we are in that cycle. Do you think we are at risk of blowing the surplus rather than the deficit?
I think the surplus is so big and the government's fiscal position is so strong that I find it very difficult to see how that could be blown. But I wouldn't rule it out.
Blown in terms of stoking the economy or overheating it too much?
Well, the big challenge in the Irish economy is the infrastructure side. That's like when I was studying economics, I used to say 30 years ago, but it's nearer to 40 years ago now. There was 1 million people at work in Ireland, and there was 3.6 million people living in the state. Now there's 5.6 million people living in the state, and we've got 2.8 million people at work. If we had sat here 30, 40 years ago and said we're going to move from having a workforce, a total number of employment in employment of 1 million to almost 3 million, we would have been taken away by men in white coats. But the scale of the recovery in the Irish economy post the global financial crisis was so surprising that we just haven't seen the infrastructure capacity of the economy keeping pace with that. And we just need to fix it. And we need to fix it reasonably expeditiously because we have the money, we have the expertise. We just need to persist with the new NDP, 100 billion spend in the next 5 years, 175 billion spend in the following 5 years. But there's a narrative in this country.
Yeah, we're very good at articulating what the problems are and what needs to happen, and yet it seems time and time again we are not good at doing big infrastructure projects. So what is missing? So is it a mindset or is it a tool set?
There's a degree of courage missing, to be perfectly honest with you. There are very few countries in the world that are brilliant at doing large infrastructure projects. By their nature, they take many years of planning. So there's really long planning lead times. And there's an extended delivery time in terms of the build. So there are very, very few that you would hold out as saying, well, this is an example of how to do infrastructure delivery. The tendency is for them to overrun in terms of time and overrun in terms of
But some
budget.
do better than others.
Some do better than others. And like, it isn't as if we're the worst in the world. Like the National Motorway Programme, in its later stages, was delivered on time and on budget. And the major railway infrastructure we had, infrastructure investment we had in the country, was delivered in large in time and on budget. But one of the problems that we have is that, well, we take a pro-cyclical approach. And that when the money is there, we spend it, and the minute the money goes, we stop spending it. But you need to have certainty in terms of planning because of that extended planning lead time and extended delivery time. You need to have certainty in relation to your capital envelopes. So you can't just say to a government agency, well, here's your budget for next year, if you're expecting them to build something that's going to take 6-7 years in terms of planning, procurement, delivery. So we need to return to multi-year capital envelopes. But we also need to stop the noise. And there's a lot of You
talked about this in your maiden speech at IBEC. Kind kind of stop the nonsense or stop the noise.
Stop the
What do you
nonsense,
actually mean by that?
Well, every single major piece of infrastructure development in this country had any number of commentators on the sidelines criticising it. So I can remember when the Dublin Port Tunnel was being built. Now, can you imagine Dublin without that port tunnel today? Oh, this is a white elephant. It's a complete waste of money. It's going to cause chaos in the M1. You're going to have all these cars sort of piling in on top of one another, and it's going to be car crashes every single morning, and it's going to lead to absolute chaos, and it's a complete waste of money. That was the commentary on that. We had similar commentary in relation to Dublin Airport Terminal 2. Entirely unnecessary, a complete waste of money, an absolute white elephant. We had similar commentary in relation to the national motorway programme. Like, there wasn't going to be a motorway coming adjacent to Kilkenny and going to Waterford. And even Lewis. Lewis was really heavily criticised for the amount of disruption it was causing and the pain it was causing, and it was a complete waste of money, and it was absolutely stupid, and why couldn't we just all go around in minibuses?
So when you
and
say...
yet, when the moment each of those projects are delivered, the public discourse changes.
So who is making the noise then? When you appeal and say, listen, we've got to stop the noise, are you appealing to business? Are you appealing to politics? And is it about better educating the public about the benefits of what they're going to achieve?
I'm appealing to every sector which is creating noise, because every sector does create noise. And I suppose that I'm asking business people in particular, please don't amplify this. Because inevitably infrastructure delivery extends over multiple electoral cycles, and if you have significant amount of noise coming out, it's going to frighten the policymakers. So the policymakers ultimately have an obligation to ignore the noise and just get the infrastructure delivered and in place.
And yet often the politics is driving that narrative and amplifying it.
I think to a lesser extent than in the past. I think there is now, like we do have a major opportunity, but we need to invest very heavily in things that do not convey any electoral advantage. And that is things like grid.
Water.
And the housing issue, of course, is now increasingly acute.
So how are we going to solve that, in your view?
Housing. Well, this is an economy that once was capable of delivering 97,000 units, when we required about 45,000. That's what we did, I think, in 2007 or maybe 2006, 2007. We're currently delivering about 30,000 units. From talking to the industry doesn't believe that there's a shortage of skills or labour or raw materials. I can promise you there's not a shortage of capital.
Is it cost of business? Is it people agitating for 0% VAT on the construction of new apartments, etc.?
Well, what the industry tells me, and we bank a large part of the industry, as you would expect, but what the industry tells me is that the key inhibitor is the availability of serviced, zoned planning, land with planning. That is
zoned land.
That is the and serviced. Service is absolutely critical. So really welcome to see the NDP re-equitising the grid and re-equitising water supply, but we need to get on with it and deliver it now. And I personally think that 60,000 houses is probably shy, because for so long we were undersupplying the market, undersupplying demand. We probably need to get above that level. And I can promise you, we have ample capital. We are amongst the very best capitalised banks in the European Union today. I have a loan-to-deposit ratio that is running at about 60%. Going into the GFC, my predecessor had one that was 140%. That was way too high. 60% is arguably too low. If I was to sort of pinpoint a perfect number,
sweet spot,
it would be somewhere in the low 80s. So we've got the capacity to, in my view, we've got the capacity to very safely and prudently lend about a third more than we currently are, and I would love to see that going into housing.
Before we get into the specifics and the details in terms of the hospitality and tourism sector, can I just sort of bring us slightly back out on the macro picture again, and the Irish economy vis-a-vis what's happening in the US, tariffs. Where do you see that picture? Are we sort of do we just keep the head down on it, or what's the best policy?
Ignore the noise and ignore the nonsense. It's a piece of advice that holds true in many situations. I like to think in 5-year cycles, so deliberately outside a sort of electoral cycle in the United States. And there are 3 mega trends coming at us at the moment.
What are they?
Well, the first one is demographics. Like our population is changing, not only ours, but you're seeing massive aging across across many European countries and indeed
Demographics
beyond.
in terms of migration, or demographics in terms of fertility,
both.
or both?
Well, 3 things: declining fertility, inward migration, and increased longevity. So huge changes happening there. But there's also within indigenous populations, for want of a better word, you are seeing a very significant aging going on, which actually is going to be augmented by what's happening with AI. Like we heard Mark earlier talking about the impact of AI on medical research, and that's one of the really exciting things about AI. It has the potential to eradicate most diseases. And you're likely to see a very, very significant increase in the natural lifespan, even within our lifetimes. So people are going to be living longer lives, and that's going to have a very, very significant impact on economies. It's going to have a very
Living
significant
longer
impact.
and having fewer, which brings me to the point just of...
No, but I'm not finished with my themes. I said there was
Go
3.
on.
The second one is AI.
Although it's my show, so...
I know it's well.
Work away.
Yeah, but there's no show without punch.
This is it.
But the second one is AI, which it's just incredible what it's capable of. And I'm not going to try and compete with Mark, and I won't. The third one is electrification. AI is extraordinarily consumptive of electricity. We're going to see an exponential explosion in terms of the need for electricity generation. And most of it is going to come in the form of renewable energy. So
we need to be ready for that to prepare for the data centres?
Yep, absolutely. And it goes back to the point in relation to the grid. But these are 3 mega trends that are far more important than who's sitting in the White House at this point in time. These are going to influence the world over the course of the next 10, 20 years.
You spoke about that, extraordinary change in terms of the working age share of the population and who's at work in Ireland. Do you worry as a business leader, as president of IBEC, about the noise, the dangerous noise around migration and the targeting of many people, including Indians here in Ireland, given our own history?
Yeah, I think that our own history introduces an ironic note to the whole thing. I grew up in a monocultural Ireland. Everybody looked the same, everybody thought the same, everybody talked the same. Today, about, I think, 17% of our population was born outside the country. And that's a number that is, I think, broadly equivalent to the UK. So what took a change that took place in the UK over multiple decades took place here in a reasonably short period of time with a relative absence of social unrest. And I'm very proud of that. I am a bit worried about what we're seeing in pockets. It is, how ironic is it for a country that, by dint of economic circumstances, was forced its citizens to go abroad for generations. How ironic, having been welcomed overseas, not always warmly, but having been welcomed overseas, that we wouldn't extend a warm welcome to those who are choosing to contribute to our economy and our society in this country.
Let's turn to tourism and hospitality. Obviously, you've heard all morning, and I'm sure it's in your ear all the time, about the incredible cost of business. Some, like energy, which are not necessarily strictly in our control, because we're a price taker in that regard. But, when you look at that whole phenomena of factors which on their own are difficult, but when taken together can be very challenging. The auto-enrolment of pensions, the minimum wage going up, the price of food, everything. What's your take on the sector as it stands?
Well, it's a hugely important sector. It is massively important as a driver of balanced regional development in Ireland. There are 2 hugely important sectors in that perspective, in my view. One is agriculture, and the other is tourism. And tourism's contribution is probably under-heralded, in terms of public discourse. It's a very significant contributor to employment, 13% of total employment in the state, 70% of which is outside Dublin, so that's really, really important for balanced development. So its well-being is vitally important for the well-being of the entirety of the Irish economy, and I would argue Irish society. There are cost pressures out there, unquestionably. And that is a feature of a life that every business is encountering. And we're also dealing with grave uncertainty in relation to demand from two key markets. One is obviously the United States, and secondly, Britain, which is having a bit of a moment at the moment, and not in a good way. So we're very pleased with the performance of the sector in certainly the past number of years. It's a very, very important sector from the point of view of the bank. We've got about 2.8 billion in loans out to the sector, and we want to do more.
Do you want to do more for, because some of the pushback is, well, especially for the regions, it's not viable for hotels or other accommodations to be built. Will the capital and the supports be there for that balanced regional development?
Well, what do? We provide credit and we provide payments services. We provide advice, industry advice. We've got our lead, Jonathan Clark, here today on that. And we also provide advice focused on sustainability. We've got ample lending capacity. There's absolutely no shortage of credit supply at the moment. What we particularly want to see AIB playing a bigger role in the greening of the economy, which is why we introduced sustainability-linked loans up to €100,000 with a rate advantage in the past number of months. So we're very, very eager to continue to support it. We take a long-term approach. We are a relationship bank. We're not here to do transactions. We're here to build long-term relationships, because I'm deeply conscious as an amateur historian, an amateur banking historian, that this is a sector which is probably more pro-cyclical than any other sector in the world, that we overlend when times are good and we underlend when times are bad, whereas our approach in AIB now is to be acyclical, is to lend all the way through the cycle, to be there for our customers most obviously and potently when they need us, which is in the bad days.
Flip on to your Ibec hat. Do you support the VAT measures that the sector has been agitating for? How important are they at a time of full employment and surplus? Yeah,
well, look, the sector has an expectation in the budget. The minister is obviously far closer to the detail of the budget than I am, and I expect it's going to be delivered. It is a labour-intensive sector. We do have a unemployment rate in the country of 4%. The labour market is exceptionally tight, and I can completely understand why they're making the case. But the case seems not to have fallen on deaf ears, if you're to accept what we're hearing.
And just a bit of a follow-up to that. Obviously, we discussed with the minister about, and there's a lot of noise about, they accusing hotels and others of price gouging, and obviously you go to a lot of European or other countries, and there is a sticker shock, I think, generally, as consumers when we travel. Do you think we are overpriced, or are we just taking our place as an island economy are we competitive, in your view?
Again, anecdote, but the anecdote is the worst type of evidence you can have. Certainly in my experience, travelling overseas, the Irish offering is very competitive. And I'm finding myself once again experiencing real sticker shock in other European capitals, and most particularly in the United States, where you find yourself stunned at the prices that people are being expected to pay. So I think that the Irish industry is actually in a strong competitive position at the moment, certainly relative to other.
Can I ask you a final question? Obviously, we've spoken many times about sustainability, which there's a lot of pushback against that phrase and that term, and things like empathy and being nice. And obviously, just as we get into this more uncertain time, is there a risk that the sustainability agenda, and it's gone through very many different names, including diversity, inclusion, everything, is that going to be pushed back or minimised, or has that train left the station?
Well, the noise has been turned down. Everybody wanted to talk about sustainability 3 or 4 years ago. And certainly you don't hear the word being bandied about as wildly or as widely as it was in the past. But the transition is still happening. And it's still happening in places like America. So you have somebody in the White House.
And in red states.
And in red states. And we know, because we bank projects in places like Texas and Indiana and the Carolinas in solar. So the transition is still happening. It is going to happen. The crisis is real. It's here. It's no longer a threat. It's actually here and present today. And regardless of the views of the leader of the free world, the transition to a greener future, and in particular more use of renewable energy, is happening even in the United States.
Even in the United States. Well, listen, that takes us to the end of my conversation with Punch. Is that how you described yourself? Does that make me Judy?
You're Judy.
Well, there we go. Well, this Punch and Judy session is over for now, but as always, thank you much, and very best wishes in your presidency with IBEC. Ladies and gentlemen, Colin Hunt, there we go.
Thanks so much indeed.
You too. Thank you.